John was born in Brooklyn, New York. He is the oldest of 6 children. One of his siblings passed as an infant.
Yeah, I've been in Michigan since I was 5 years old. Winters aren't much fun, but in the summer, spring, fall, I'd be hard-pressed to find a place that's any better to live than, as it's referred to affectionately as the Mitten. My real first memories, actually, because we moved there right before the start of the school year, was when JFK was assassinated. I came home from kindergarten, and my mom was just in front of the TV, just shocked. And so I sat there with her all afternoon while we listened to the reports and everything. And I guess that's my earliest memory of Michigan.
From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time.
My dad was in the finance, corporate finance. He was the chief financial officer for Clausen Concrete, which was one of the major concrete companies in the Midwest back in the day. And he got there by after he got out of the Navy. He worked all day, went to St. John's University at night. For 6 years till he got his degree, and then when we got into Michigan, I think it was around the time maybe I was a freshman in high school, he went back to school at Central Michigan University and got his master's degree, also in finance. My dad was basically got his first jobs when he was still in grade school, delivering groceries. And matter of fact, one of the famous little stories about my dad was he went into this little grocery store in Brooklyn and wanted to get a delivery job, and they used to deliver groceries back then with bicycle with these huge baskets on the front. And the guy asked my dad, he said, well, can you ride a bike? Well, Dad had never been on a bike in his life. They were too poor to afford one, and he said, oh, well, of course I can ride a bike. And he climbed on a bike for the first time that day, and apparently managed not to fall over and dump the groceries, and taught himself how to ride a bike. And that was kind of, I guess, his first job. My dad was an incredibly hard worker, and really everything he achieved in his life was just total will and intestinal fortitude, and those were terrific lessons for me. Mom was one of 2 children. My dad was one of 4 boys. My mom and her brother were raised in one of the upscale neighborhoods in Brooklyn. Dad and his family were from the other side of the tracks, as they say. And Mom was a secretary on Wall Street. She could type 100 words a minute on a manual keyboard typewriter. We actually had to manually reset the carriage. It was before the electric typewriters, where the carriage would return by itself. And my brothers and sisters and I will chuckle about it sometimes, because it really sounded like someone was sending Morse code as fast as they can, just tap, 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 tap. And that was Mom on the keyboard. Once she did get married, she was a stay-at-home mom until I think maybe my junior year or thereabouts. And then she went back to school herself and got a degree in geriatrics. And I think she graduated maybe when I was 20 or so. And then she ran a senior living community for the Archdiocese of Detroit for 20-some years until she retired. I intended to take a year off. At 13 years of Catholic school, I was a little traumatized, and thought I'd take a year off and then go back to school, but I ended up getting my first sales job and pretty much was in sales my entire life until the founding of the Shuffleboard Federation when I was 29. And I guess, you know, kind of in the same vein as my dad, I was working, hustling odd jobs, you know, shoveling driveways, mowing lawns, whatever I could to, you know, get some little bit of money in my pocket. And I remember at 12 years old, I bought my first stereo system with money that I had made from driveways and mowing lawns, and I've had a lifelong appreciation for music ever since then. But I guess the job that I enjoyed the most growing up and still have incredibly fond memories of was caddying at a private club called Plum Hollow Golf Club. And I did that for 5 years, made a lot of great relationships. A couple of the members became mentors to me, and we maintained contact for a couple of decades until they passed. I really think that experience actually has really helped me in the business side of my shuffleboard career. And that may sound a little strange, but that put me in an environment where I was dealing with highly successful people on a daily basis. And people may not know this about the Shuffleboard Federation, but over the last 25 years or so, the primary part of my business has been selling residential use shuffleboard tables. And a lot of those are the 12 and 14 footers, much smaller than what we play on, but the clientele are generally people living in, you know, multi-million dollar homes. And I think the experience of spending 5 summers around people with those type of backgrounds really kind of gave me a comfort level, and it's worked out to really be a benefit to me in that part of my business.
John was elected by his peers into the TSA Shuffleboard National Hall of Fame in the year of 2004, and his ceremony was held at his tournament in Reno. Several tributes were written to John in his induction booklet. Here is the first one from the late Bill Melton. I first met John in the early 80s in Detroit. He was very young, but I could already tell he was going to go far in shuffleboard. I was highly impressed by his skill and his enthusiasm. He came up with the great ideas of a shuffleboard federation and was the first to talk of turning shuffleboard into a professional sport. Today, John is one of the best players in the game. He promotes shuffleboard around the country and is involved in shuffleboard at all levels. He definitely deserves this honor. Congratulations, John.
Looks like Darryl Nelson's coming up.
The late Darryl Nelson writes, John and I have known each other and have been close friends for several years now. John has served our game in many ways. First of all, he is a great player. We have played with and against each other many times, with each of us winding up on both ends of it. John has also been instrumental in the evolution of our game by holding tournaments that offer events for all level of players. Lastly, John serves our game by offering excellent shuffleboard supplies. Congratulations, John, you are truly deserving of this honor. Your friend, Darryl Nelson.
My name is Darryl Nelson, and I sincerely endorse this message.
John was the youngest person inducted into the TSA Hall of Fame, something that I know he is extremely proud of.
Table Shuffleboard Association's Hall of Fame. We'd like to present this award to you in recognition of your induction into the Hall of Fame. Congratulations.
Well, I'm not ordinarily at a loss of words. We'll see how I do with this. I
I've been really fortunate to have had a lot of highlights over the 28 years I've been around this game. A lot of those have been with people in this room on the other end of the board, and I've thoroughly enjoyed all of them. Some of them have also come at the expense of some of the people in this room, and I've enjoyed those too. You know, to hear all these kind words about support of the game and everything, you know, I'm living a dream that very few people get a chance to live. To turn something that's your passion into something that you can make a living at. I couldn't possibly make enough donations to square up with all the things that shuffleboard has given to me. I feel extremely fortunate to have been able to make it my business. Most of my closest friends are people that are involved in shuffleboard.
Seeing my first shuffleboard table as a result of a couple of the guys I caddied with had found a bar that we could get served at. Back then the drinking age in Michigan was 18 and we were all 17 and a half, 17, 3/4, whatever. And they said, hey, I found this bar that'll serve us. So I went up there with my best buddy, Mark Rutkowski, who's been in Phoenix for many years. Saw my first shuffleboard table and was fascinated by it. I think it was a couple of weeks before I actually threw any weights, but I got in there one day, I guess it must have been a little bit early, and there was nobody on the table, so I just went and shot some weights back and forth and just thought it was the coolest thing in the world, and it didn't take long to get hooked. And I literally played 363 days a year for the next 2 or 3 years, and 363 meaning every day but Christmas and Easter. The bar was open, all the other days. So I went from being a sub on the league team that first year to a starter the second year to team captain the third year. And right about that time, 1979, I played in my first tournament. And the tournament was held at a place called the Wagon Wheel Tavern in Lake Orion, Michigan. And that's the bar that Rick Boyer and a lot of other really good players came out of, which was owned at one point in time by Manny Lane, whose name is well known amongst shuffleboard old timers. He's been in Arkansas for years and years, but he owned the bar at one point in time. And then it's kind of a famous story. Billy Mays came through there at one point in time, and the owner told all the guys, look, there's this guy coming through, Billy Mays, and he's the world champion shuffleboard hustler, and we're not giving him a dime of action on anything. So Billy comes in and tries to get some shuffleboard action. Nobody will play him. He had his little gimmick bets and couldn't get any action there, and looked over and saw a shuffle alley machine, which is, if people are not familiar with that, that's the one that has the little 10 pins that flip up. It's about maybe 5 feet long. You shoot a big oversized, what looks like an oversized shuffleboard weight down there. And Billy said, well, I'm the world champion at that too, and I'll bowl anybody in the house for all the money you got, and I'll do it blindfolded. Well, so the owner went from, we're not giving this guy a dime of action on anything, to everybody give me all your money. And they loaded up on that game, and Billy bowled a 290 blindfolded, 12 strikes, missed 1 pin, and made the spare immediately. And they asked him afterwards, how did you know what pin you missed? And he said, I could tell I pushed it or pulled it a little bit, and he knew he was, I can't remember, just right or just left to center, and knew that he had left either the 7 or the 10. And just picked it up immediately, bowled that 290, and busted everybody in the house that day. So that was the place I played my first tournament, and a guy named Earl Crandall was the tournament director, and Earl was much older than I was, middle 50s I think, and seemingly had no sense of humor, but that didn't stop me from making some suggestions to him. Even though it was my first tournament, I saw a couple of things that I thought would make it a better event, and I was bold enough to go up there and suggest those to Earl, who gave me a kind of a nasty look and said, if you're so effing smart, you go run the next one. So I walked away and thought about it, and maybe 6 weeks later or so, I ran my first tournament at the Winter Garden Bar in Detroit. And Winter Garden was the hot spot back then. We would get 8 to 12 people, 5 or 6 days a week, playing $20 draws. Really solid competition all the way around. Now, at that point in time, I was just starting to become a halfway decent player, and I have strong memories of the locals back then that we would actually draw bottle caps for partners. They put in like 2 paps, 2 strohs, and caps. And the first thing that those older guys did when they drew their caps, they ran over to see what I had drawn, hoping that they weren't my partner. And boy, that was it was brutal. If you made a mistake, especially as a young player like myself, they'd literally jump off the chair and just scream and yell at you in front of everybody. And I knew after going through that if I ever got good at the game, I told myself I would never do that to a partner, and I never have in all of these, oh gosh, what has it been? 76 to now, so nearly 5 decades of playing. I've never yelled at a partner for a bad shot, so that's one of the things I'm a little bit proud of, but I remembered how that made me feel. So anyway, that first tournament at the Winter Garden, I'm playing with my first partner, Scott Rupert, and Bud Broca and Jim Long were partners. Buddy's not in the Hall of Fame for some reason. I think at one point in time there was a rule that you had to be in your state Hall of Fame first, and he was a native of Ohio who didn't have a state Hall of Fame, and Buddy was a real straight up guy, and when there was talk of putting him in the Hall of Fame, he said, not unless I'm in the state one first, I don't want any special considerations, nor would I accept any, and that's just the way he was. But Scotty and I got to the finals against Bud and Jim Long, and they just ran over us, just steamrolled us. Years later, I'd gotten to be really good friends with the two of them, and I was mentioning that tournament, and they both chuckled a little bit, and Jim kind of, gave Bud a little elbow. He said, "Remember that, buddy? We looked over at those guys and said to ourselves, look at them, they think they can win." And they thought that was the funniest thing in the world, because they knew we had absolutely no chance whatsoever of beating them, and they got quite a chuckle out of it. So I didn't hear that story till quite a few years later. From there, I really wanted to play with Bud. I could see that he was a shuffleboard player unlike anybody that I had ever met, and after that first introduction there with Jim, wasn't too much longer after that he came through with the great Truman Adams from the Portland area, and Truman's been dead many years now, but just to give you an idea of how highly he was regarded, he was one of the 2 guys that Darryl considered to be mentors. Darryl often mentioned, how much he learned from Truman, and so that was he was the first road player I ever saw. And then Bud was back not too much longer, or not too much later down the road with Billy Childs, and who I got to know very well and become good friends with. In fact, I stayed with Billy and his wife Chris and their kids for a couple of weeks at one point in time. I was on the road, but Billy was a freehand lagger, and the first person we ever saw that lagged that way or even shot span shots. So that was a huge eye-opening experience for us. And I remember we were there playing at the Winter Garden on Friday night, and the phone rang, and it was his buddy said he wanted to come through with somebody the following day if they could get some action. So we were all excited about that, and we got there. Bar opened at noon. They walked in to a board that we knew like the back of our hands and played every day, and they won that first game and held the board all the way till closing time. That 15 hours later, never lost a game, and it was just the most incredible display of lagging I had ever seen, and it was all freehand, and it just Billy threw so many threes that it legitimately got to the point later on in the night when they got to 12, people were already reaching for their wallets because they knew Billy was going to lag another 3 and go out the next frame. So I pull up in the parking lot maybe 11:45 or so, 15 minutes before the bar opens, and couple minutes later, my partner Scott pulls up and he's like, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Same thing you're doing here. I'm going to learn that shot." We went in there and we practiced freehand for the first time in our lives, and then found out that they had actually gone out to this bar in Lake Orion, the Wagon Wheel, and I thought to myself, well, if they ran over us at the Winter Garden the way they did, those guys at the Wagon Wheel got no chance either. So I ran out there and bet on Bud and Billy and got back whatever money I had lost the previous day. And well, I took a little heat from that from Rick, who I'd gotten to know a little bit, and we became very close friends over the years, as a lot of people know. That was kind of my first introduction to legitimate world-class players: Truman, Buddy, Jim Long, and Billy Childs. So at that point in time, I really wanted to play with Bud. I just knew that he thought the game on a level that was way beyond what any of us had ever experienced. And so for the next couple of years, every time I went to a tournament, he was there. I just begged him to play with me, and he turned me down one time after another. And finally, it was 1983 at the Winter Garden. After a tournament there, we were all standing outside after the bar closed, just chit-chatting a little bit. And I said, "Hey, Bud, there's a tournament in Detroit in a couple weeks, and it has to be my partner." And he said no. And his brother Terry said, "Geez, Bud, give the kid a chance." And his brother Greg also chimed in, "Yeah, come on, buddy. What's give the kid a shot." So Buddy turned to me, and this is 23. This is 40 years ago, and I remember it like it happened yesterday. He looked me right in the eyes and said, "I've been watching you play for the last couple of years. You got enough talent to be world champion, but you party like a chump." And what he meant by that was I drank beer back then, a lot of it, and he considered that to be well, he just, in his mind, there was no way you could be a great player and drink. So he told me, he said, "Look, I don't drink and play shuffleboard. I'll give you a shot, but that's the condition. I'm not drinking, you're not drinking either, and if you want to give it a shot on that basis, we'll try it." So, boy, I sure did like drinking beer, but it was, I gave that up like that, because I wanted to be this guy's partner a lot more than I wanted any beer. So we went out and won that first tournament together, and then strung together a pretty strong record over the next couple of years. We won a lot of the tournaments we played in, and we're just always in the hunt in the ones we didn't. And he really, remember, he told me he would improve my game 30% in the first 6 months. And mind you, at that point in time, I was winning just about every tournament in Michigan and thought that I was right there on the edge of world class. Well, I found out I was miles away from being a world class player. That's when I really started to find out how much I did not know about the game, and it was a real eye opener to see that there were so many levels that I weren't even on my radar screen. I guess after a few years of doing that, we get to fast forward to January of '86. And I started a road trip that lasted from the end of January all the way to the beginning of December, so 10 and a half months or thereabouts, and crisscrossed the country several times. The real pivotal moment in terms of shuffleboard relationships was at the tournament, the President's Day tournament at the Corporate Image in Fort Worth. That was the name of a bar owned by David Williams. And that's where I met Darrell and Doug Buell and David Williams. I had met Milton prior to that. Met Freddie Thuman there, Leroy Ledford, Portland Eddie, Sam Summers, just a whole bunch of them. So from there I went out to Oregon, and there was a tournament St. Patrick's Day weekend in Springfield, which is where Darrell lived at the time. The bar was the Palm Tavern. That was Daryl's home base. So I went up there, and I don't know what I did in the tournament. I didn't win it. I don't know if I cashed or what happened, but from there, we went back to Daryl's house, spent Monday there. On Tuesday, I said I'd like to go up to see the Black Cat, and he said, well, they only play there on weekends, but there's a couple of other bars we can visit, between now and then. So, great. So I hop in Daryl's truck, and here I am, just a nobody in the shuffleboard world, and I'm running around with the world champion, and that was just like the coolest thing on earth to me.
And this is the old Black Cat that had the big tournament out back in the early 70s.
So here we are. This is Tuesday after the tournament at the Palm Tavern, and a guy named Steve Wilson was staying with Daryl at the time, and Steve was an old, he was actually a phenomenal pool player. Made a lot of money playing pool, and the three of us sat out together, and Daryl said, we're going to go to this place called the Village Pub in Portland, and he said they won't play me, but they'll play either you guys as partners or John, they'll play you singles. I'm not sure who was there, but I do know that Georgine Parrish was there for at least one of those days, her and her husband, Frank Menares. And so Steve and I beat the owner, Mike D'Angelo, and his partner a number of games, and the partner quit. So Mike and I go to singles, and I just drowned him the rest of the night. And we made, I don't remember how much money, but I know that I was low on money at that point in time, and by the time the day was over, we were somewhat flush by road player shuffleboard standards. So Mike says, well, you come back tomorrow, I got another game for you, and I find out I'm going to be playing Galen Gauntz. Well, this is like a whole nother level, because I hadn't met Galen, but he was an absolute legend, and was eventually a Hall of Famer. And so Galen comes in, and I found out the action is they want to play best 3 out of 5 for 500 singles, Galen and I. So I beat him 9 straight games, 3 matches in a row. He never won a game. They quit. So Daryl and Steve and I are up another 500 apiece at that point in time. And I think Thursday we just did pretty much nothing, and then Friday night was the Black Cat. So I called Phil Scover, who was backing me at the time, told him what was going on. We'd made ourselves a couple thousand over the last couple days, and now we got this match where there's apparently as much action as we want, and he flew out for it. So I get in there a couple hours early. I was always real big on practice and preparation, and I was told that I would be playing on board 2, so I practiced board 2, and I got this thing absolutely wired. And I found out the guy I'm going to play, his name is Mac Macarunas, nicknamed Little Mac, who finished 3rd in Billy Mays' big tournament in '84 in Vegas. That was the 3 out of 5, $800 entry fee, 3 out of 5 triple elimination. So my confidence is absolutely all-time sky high. I just beat Galen Gauntz, and some guy named Little Mac, I'm like just licking my chops to play this guy. So I go in there, and I had been told that our match was going to be on board 2, which is the middle board of the 3 tables that were at the Black Cat. So by the time he's getting ready to roll in, I got that board. I knew every shot on it. So he walks in, first thing he does is he wipes off and waxes board 3. And I was like, oh, I thought we were going to play on board 2. He says, no, I'm going to play over here, but if you need some time to practice, I was just, let me out of the gate, kind of anxious to play. I'm like, no, I'm good. So everybody in the bar is betting, lining up for side bets. And I told Phil, I said, hey, Daryl and Steve and I have been, out these last few days, splitting everything 3 ways, and, we should offer Daryl and Steve, a piece of our action. And Bill said, yeah, absolutely, that's fair. So I walked up to Daryl and said, so how much of this do you want, referring to how much of my action do you want? And Daryl says, I don't want any of it. So, oh, okay, that was an interesting moment, because I thought maybe there's more to this little Mac guy than what I thought. Well, that was an understatement. We played 21 games, he won 19 of them. That remains the biggest beating I ever took in my life, and people have asked me, why didn't you quit? And I don't know, I just didn't think this guy was a better player than me, but he obviously was, and I just couldn't slow him down. He just lagged the lights out of the table, and we ended up becoming buddies after that. I think probably his best friend, name that's still around and somewhat well known in the shuffleboard community, is Charlie Gates, who was lived in Portland for many years, but he's been in Arizona for quite some time now. So that was really the first experiences with Daryl, but then we went up to Washington, down to California. We went all the way to Fort Worth and back, and we stayed together until middle July. So was that March, April, May, June, 4.5, 5 months we're out there on the road together. And I guess our last stop before we parted ways for a while was at Ted Z's place in Temecula for his annual 4th of July tournament. And I remember that event so clearly, because it was the first time I ever met Chris Danke, and she became a dear friend who met a horrible death way too young in life. But at that point in time, I had been playing 7 days a week on the road for about 5 months. I probably have never played any better in my life. Maybe smarter these days than I was back then, but as far as just shooting goes, I was absolutely at the top of my game. So here I am playing Chris, who I had never met before, and everything I did, she had an answer for. If I went around a weight, she went around both of them. If I hit a weight and slid it over to a deuce, she hit it again and slid it over to a 3. And it just, she had free hands and blast shots, and was just an incredible player. And we became really good friends until she passed away. But I guess that was one of my most enduring memory of that particular event. We went down to, Daryl and I hooked back up again about a month later to go to the first U.S. Open tournament, which Jim, you uncovered, or Don Bach uncovered that treasure of a video with the full match between Billy Mays and Daryl back in the day. And it's really interesting watching Daryl's evolution as a player, because when I first met him in '86 and we partnered up a few times, he was almost exclusively jersey shots with an occasional span and no free hands at all. And literally within 2 years, he was almost exclusively span shots and had just a monster world-class free hand. So in those couple of years, he went from already being widely regarded as the best singles player in the game to just upping that a couple of notches. And man, I learned so much from that guy, not just about that part of the game, but the way his preparation was. And as I said, I was always a guy that really prided myself on being the best prepared guy in the house, and he showed me just another level there. And not only just the shuffleboard practice, but he would do other things just to train mind and body. It was really like the first shuffleboard athlete, I guess. He would spend time he had a little punching speed bag, meditating, bike riding, and he'd be like, no red meat, no caffeine, for weeks before a major event, and he called all of that collectively as being in training. At that point in time, this is now going into the fall of 1986, and I had actually contacted the guys who were the tournament directors or owners of the major tournaments and convinced them all to do a little point system that I had come up with We had just a rudimentary set of rules, which was basically the Ramus rules, famously written by Pee Wee Ramus from California, who's also a Hall of Famer. And really about the only thing that was added to that was that players would be allowed to bring their own weights, which prior to 1986, late 1986, that wasn't a thing. So all these tournaments agreed to kick in $500 apiece for this Player of the Year thing. And the guy who owned the Ace of Clubs, Jerry Miller, just not a guy I got along with very good. We were ethically miles apart, and so we got in there for that tournament Labor Day weekend, and he had those rules posted up on his wall, and he says, hey, he's pointing at me. He went right down to there about the rule on being able to use your own weights, cross it out, and said, like, not in my house, we're not doing that. That infuriated me because we had an understanding, these tournaments, we were all going to do this by the same rules, and here we are, 35, 40 years later, still not all playing by the same rules. But I don't know if I even want to go there. But anyway, when he did that, it just really pissed me off. I just took it as a huge slight and an insult, and I told Phil, I said, you know what, I'm going to run a tournament next Memorial Day weekend, same weekend as Jerry Miller's tournament, and I'm going to bust that guy. So, youthful overconfidence. I put out flyers for the tournament. We did all kinds of stuff. I gave about 4 nights free at the hotel for the first 20 people that signed up. Bill Melton agreed to be the treasurer, if you will, and put his name on the flyer. We said, you got to pre-register, send it to Bill, and that was, everybody knew that the money was safe if Bill Melton was holding it. So we didn't even have a venue lined up, and I didn't think that was going to be any problem. So here we are now. It's already into like February. The tournament's flyer's been out for a couple of months. Venue to be announced, and I'd gone to every Legion, Elks Lodge, VFW, Eagles. Everybody's got weddings on that Friday and Saturday. Never realized that Memorial Day weekend in Michigan was the #1 weekend of the year for weddings, and there were no venues. So here we are. Now I think we're only like 6 weeks away from the tournament, still don't have a location. So, and as Phil used to tell me back then, I'd say, John, boy, you're really good at some things, but you don't make small mistakes, he told me. But this was turning into a monster of a mistake. And we finally found a place called the Dearborn Athletic Club, and they agreed to rent us their gymnasium to hold the tournament. Perfect layout. We were able to put 6 boards and bleachers and elevated seating and a couple of action boards behind the bleachers, and looked like everything was going to really fall into place for us. Well, so now the expenses started really adding up. We had to rent the chairs, the risers, because the club had none of those things. So, $1,000 here, $1,000 there, and all of a sudden, we're into 5 figures worth of expenses. And the real shocker came, God, this was like on Monday, I think. Tournament's supposed to start on Thursday. The insurance agent for the Dearborn Athletic Club happened to stop by, and he was talking to the general manager. And the general manager mentioned that they're going to be hosting this shuffleboard tournament. And the guy said, shuffleboard, like, the bar shuffleboard? He says, yeah. He says, will they sprinkle that stuff on the table? The guy says, yeah. He says, and you can't have that going on a gym floor. He said, that's just a lawsuit waiting to happen. And so I get a call from the general manager. He says, hey, my insurance agent says that we have to carpet the gymnasium, or you have to carpet the gymnasium, or we have to cancel the event. Good Lord, the event starts in 3 days. So fortunately, Neil Fetter, who was one of the first people I met in shuffleboard, his mom's side of the family owned a chunk of a company called New York Carpet World, which is a very big carpet company in Michigan back then. I told Neil, I said, man, we're really up against it. I need to get this entire gymnasium carpeted in the next 2 days, or they're canceling our tournament. So Neil got us just a ridiculous, I don't even think I think he did it for less than cost. But we ordered 4 rolls of carpeting, 12 feet by 90 feet, to carpet this gymnasium. So we slap all that down on Wednesday. I think we're good to go. Get another call Wednesday night saying that it has to be seamed together. And I'm like, good Lord, could anything else go wrong? So, back to Neil, and Thursday, a couple of guys are out there and they make those. When we had 4 pieces of carpets, that'd be 3 seams 90 feet long in this thing to make one contiguous piece of carpeting. So by the time we get done, we got over $17,000 in expenses for this event. And Daryl and I were partners, and we win the doubles event and make back a few thousand of that. And then the singles event was my first major, first win in a major singles, and I double dipped Bill Melton to do it. And all told, with the singles win and the doubles win, I won $19,000. We had $17,000 in expenses. I think we cleared like $1,500 for the week when all was said and done. And that was my first tournament as the Shuffleboard Federation. 10.5-month road trip in '86 to 1987 with that first Michigan Open, and then I ran a tournament in June of that year in Colorado, a place called Bliners Sports Pub, and that was a pro singles, pro doubles, and I won the singles and the doubles there. Again, this time I beat Daryl in the singles finals and Sam Summers, and I won the doubles tournament. After the tournament's over, a local player named Jody Slack had invited us back to his house, and a guy named Bill Moore, who was a close friend of Billy Mays, had started to hang out at, I guess he had been hanging out at tournaments, but we became friends, and he had been after me. He knew that I had recently become a fan of blues music, which that was really, I have Billy Childs to thank for that. He had this huge blues collection, and he'd play stuff for me every day that I'd never heard, and I just kind of fell in love with the music. And Bill Moore really wanted me to see this movie called Crossroads, and it was the story of Robert Johnson, which I won't get into all the details of that. If you're a blues fan, you already know something about that story. If you're not, and you Google it, you'll find out. But so he had this VHS tape of the movie, and Jody Slack had invited us over to his house after the tournament, and Bill said, well, do you have a video player? And he said, yeah. So Bill puts in this movie, and we're watching it, and it's about a child prodigy guitar player, and learning from an old blues master. And I'm sitting there, and to my left is Billy Mays, to my right, Daryl Nelson. We're sitting on a couch together, and there's a line in the movie. I remember this, the old blues master was talking about reflecting on his life, and he said, good times, bad times, and when it's all said and done, all I want them to be able to say is, boy, he could really play. And my God, that was 1987. I just got goosebumps just thinking about that moment, because that he could really play, and I'm looking at these two shuffleboard gods on either side of me, just pinching myself, not really believing that I'm really in this room with these two people. And I don't know if I was their peer at that point in time, but I was certainly making a name for myself, and that was just a night that I'm quite certain I will never forget. So from there we went on to the U.S. Open tournament again. I don't really remember how we finished up that year in '87, but that was kind of my trial by fire. Actually, no, we did a tournament out east in. This is kind of funny, actually. I had been looking for a location out east, and they were really expensive. Hotels were expensive out there, and ballrooms were expensive. And I stumbled upon this place called the George Washington Motor Lodge. You know, white pillars out in front, looked like a southern, mansion plantation thing. And I'm thinking, well, this is really cool. This is like a legit, like East Coast, like part of history kind of venue. So we went out there for the tournament, and we were getting boards from American Shuffleboard. Saul Lipkin had arranged to have boards delivered to us there. And Rick Boyer and I drove out together that night. And so we arrive at the place, and it's dark, and we got checked in. The next morning, we wake up, Rick goes outside first, and he says, John, he says, better come out here. And I look, and this place looked like it was behind the Iron Curtain after World War II. It looked like a bomb had hit it. And I'm like, what? And I'm looking at this picture on the brochure and looking at this dilapidated, ready to fall down building. And I realized when I'm looking at the picture that all the cars in the parking lot were like 1950s brand new models. So they sent us this brochure that was like 30 years old when the hotel was new. And now we've got this we're lucky the place didn't fall down on us. So that was another one of those weird little shuffleboard lessons. And we further find out that the ballroom we're supposed to be in, there's a 90-degree turn in the hallway. We can't even get the tables into this room. So now we're just completely panicked. We got a tournament getting ready to start and no place to hold it. The guy says, well, we got this other area over here, and it was basically just like a big garage. It had a roll-up door and concrete floors, and we unloaded the tables and got them set up in there and ran that event. And I do remember, of all the people I met that trip, I really distinctly remember Al DeBella and Louise Freer, who had just started playing. And Al hasn't played in years, but Louise has continued to be a presence in the shuffleboard community, and our friendship dates all the way back to those days. Actually, we did this thing in the hotel, this little circuit for a couple of years, and we're well into six figures in the red on running those events. My original really dream was to be able to set up a circuit and have a corporate sponsor like Budweiser paying us to do leagues and tournaments, because I just absolutely had fallen in love with running tournaments. It just I just felt like I was born for that job. But after taking all those losses, it became obvious that we needed some sort of revenue to come in, or we were not going to be around very long, and that became the launch of the product line. We started out with just one powdered wax product, and that grew into the whole lineup that the Shuffleboard Federation offers today. So a few years went by doing these tournaments, and then we wanted to do one in Las Vegas, and did the first North American Championships at the Sahara Hotel, and it was a fabulous, the room itself was fabulous. We actually had elevated seating, two tiers of it, on both ends of the shuffleboard tables. We had a tier that was 18 inches off the ground with full 8-foot, 30-inch by 30-inch tables, and then another row behind that was 30 inches high. So we had this stadium seating, and there were 12 tables there. We probably could have run it on half of that. My God, the room was so big, I think we had like 10 feet in between the tables. I'll get you some pictures of the layout for the video. So we just took an absolute beating there. I think they gave us 2 comp rooms, and even back then, we had a staff of half a dozen people, so we had to buy the rooms, or airfare, pay all the costs. And Dynamo, which later became Game Time, which later became Champion Shuffleboard. All the business never changed hands during that time, but they renamed the company a couple of times. So that was the start of my relationship with Kelly Stites, who owns Champion Shuffleboard, and that relationship has continued for the last 35 or 36 years. So anyway, after taking just a huge financial beating, we're like, there's no future for us in Nevada, because we had talked to other hotels, and we were just too small of a group, to be of any interest to them. And a couple of months later, I get a phone call from a woman named Barbara Woodward, and she said, I'm with the Sands Regency Casino Hotel in Reno, and I'm with the casino marketing department, and casino marketing has this slate of events that includes a couple of pool tournaments, backgammon, chess, cribbage, darts, and we think that shuffleboard might be a good addition into the mix. So I flew out there and met with them, and we signed a one-year deal to do a tournament in 1991, and they liked it. We went back, signed another one-year deal for 92.
I'd like to interview you there. Did you just come out of retirement?
Yes, I did, sir.
Yeah. You back into it?
Never tastes better.
Yeah.
I gotta go now.
All right. That's Mitch from Portland, Oregon. One of the top players up there. There's Doug Buell, and Dale Nelson.
And I think in 94, I think we signed a 3-year deal, and then another 3-year deal in 1997. And by that time, the tournament had grown to 24 boards. Sands for the second year of the North American Championships, which was the first year at the Sands. I think parallel to the long wall, 2 groups of 6. And when I looked at it, and then thought about traffic flow to get to the kind of stuff, I said, guys, I don't like this. And I had my setup crew turn around all 12 of those boards in the opposite direction, and they had to re-level them, and boy, they were just cussing me out that we had to go through all that, but it was a better layout, and we stuck with it. And so in the early years, we followed the chess tournament. I think they had 2 of them a year, but there was a big one in the fall, and we had no clout at that point in time. We were the newbies, and the chess tournament ended at midnight on Sunday, and that's when we started our setup, and we set up all night, and actually started the first events on Monday afternoon, 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So in the span of 16 hours, we set up and had, 5 days or 6 days, but as it grew, we added more boards and more events, and when we had gotten up to 24 boards, we were getting 18 of them from Don Krall, who was the commander of the American Legion in Del City, and we had a great relationship, and we actually, over a span of, 5, 6, 7 years, they would set a record for attendance and for prize money, and then we'd break it in the fall, and they'd break it again in July, and we just went back and forth, and it was really great to have somebody that, was a big supporter of our tournament. We were a big supporter of his, but we still had, kind of a friendly rivalry, which really helped us both be better in what we did. But those boards, they were all old. A lot of them had, cracked over the years. He refinished them, and they did fine in Oklahoma, where they had pretty good humidity, but man, we brought them out to the desert and just had all kinds of problems with them, rails dumping after the first day. And I just knew back then, in 2000, we set what was the tournament record back then, 288 players. And I just knew if we didn't get this board thing figured out, that the tournament was going to go downhill and eventually fold, because you just, as I told the powers that be at the Sands back then, if you have great boards, you can screw up everything else, involved with the tournament, and people will still have favorable impressions, and they'll come back. But if you have your administrative side is, executionally perfect, but your boards are bad, it's a bad tournament, and that's it. So I ran a little bit of a bluff on them, because I really wanted to continue to do the event, but I told them that we had decided that this was going to be the last North American Championships, and they were just stunned. They said, well, why? We just set a record, everything's running great. And I said, the boards are not good, and eventually it's going to kill the tournament, and I don't want the tournament to shrink and eventually disappear. I'd rather go out on a high note. They're like, well, what needs to be done, for proper tournament equipment? So I made them up a list. We need custom-made tables. They've got to be sealed on the bottoms. We need extra climatic adjusters. We need this, we need that. And they said, well, what's all that going to cost? I said, well, put it all together for you, and it ended up being 104 or 5 or 6,000. I don't remember what it was for those original 24 boards. And they proposed that they would put up 100% of the money for that in exchange for a 6-year contract, and at the end of 6 years I would own the tables. So yeah, couldn't say no to that, obviously. So that's where we got the boards that we played on for pretty close to 20 years. And then I'm sure a lot of people remember the year that in 2019 where the humidification system at the Sands failed and nobody realized it, and the humidifier had been shut off for a couple of months, and by the time we got there, the boards were all just completely high-centered, unplayable. Some of them had cracked. Actually had them turned, playing surfaces turned upside down in the cradles, and we had towels lined on the full length of every board, and we're pouring water on those towels. And as outrageous as that seems, you can actually fix a high-centered board overnight generally by doing that. It just sucks up the moisture and becomes concave again, but these were just too dried out, and we just couldn't really get them playable that week, despite the incredible efforts of the setup guys. So, you know, here we were, we're at another crossroads, and the hotel had been bought by a guy named Jeff Jacobs, which was the beginning of the reinvention of the Sands. And this contract that we had signed for the board storage was signed by the previous owner. Jacobs and his management team had nothing to do with it, and that was my first time I knew that they were really honorable people, because they agreed to immediately replace all 24 of the playing surfaces because of the storage issue. So I told them if we're going to get 24 new playing surfaces, I'd like to get 24 new cradles as well. So we put together a deal where they bought and paid for the playing surfaces and advanced the money for the 24 new cradles. Same thing, we signed a multi-year contract at the end of which I owned the tables. This is the last year of that deal, and so the tables will be mine at that point in time. It was after that first trip to Texas to the corporate image, and we were playing on the wax was just straight white beads, and it was just god awful. It was slow, it tracked horribly. You got a mush hit seemingly every frame, and I was just on a rant on it on the plane ride back home. And Bill turned and said to me, he says, you know nothing about business in general or the shuffleboard business, but you got passion and you can't teach that. He said, we're going to go into the shuffleboard business, and that was kind of the start. And so now that we've come full circle, I announced last week I've made a deal to sell the company to Jason Papa, who I've known since he was a toddler, and Jay Norman. It's like, oh my God, my baby that I've nursed for the last 35 years is now going to be in somebody else's hands. And so it's been a kind of an emotional roller coaster over the couple of months that we've been working on finalizing this deal, but it's also a huge relief to me, because I guess that's the thing. The North American Championships and the Shuffleboard Federation products are things that I'm extremely proud of, and I know that I've heard comments, that video that you recently released that Don Bach found of the 1986 US Open. We had that full match between Billy Mays and Darrell Nelson, and you could see these guys were nearly throwing overhand to get the weights to the other end of the table. And the fact that through trial and error and more trial, came out with a product that the shuffleboard community considers to be the best wax and weights on the market. And sorry if that sounds self-serving, but I think it's a fair and accurate statement. The thought that if I dropped dead, that those products might just disappear from the market, and we would, the surviving shuffleboard community would be back to playing on wax with mush hits with no access to, to the weights that they have, bought, so many sets of over the years. Really bothered me. I didn't want whatever legacy I've established to die if something happened to me. I hope to be around for a good deal many years, but the fact that there is now a succession plan in place, and if I drop dead tonight, I know that those products will continue to be available to the community, and that was really, really important to me. And so I'm super happy that we've gotten the deal done. And one of the things I'm really looking forward to is playing more shuffleboard. I got to a point where I was playing very little over a span of 8 or 9 years, and last year kind of got the bug again. Well, I guess one of the real tough things about being in the business is that it kind of sucks some of the fun out of playing for me, because if I go to a tournament, it's impossible for me not to end up in business conversations. We're talking about equipment or wax or weights, or what do you think about this that such and such tournament director did, which I just avoid like the plague, commenting on other people's tournaments. I just see that as a no-win scenario. If I disagree or would have done it differently, they'll run back to the tournament director and say, well, John McDermott said this. And so I just, it kind of got to the point where I didn't enjoy spending my free time in a shuffleboard bar. And that's why I got back into golf, which I've never been very good at, but God, I sure do love it. But last year in March, I decided that I wanted to see if there's anything left in the tank for me as a player at the age of then 63, and went back and practiced really hard like I used to, throwing 5, 6, 7, 800, sometimes 1,000 weights a day, getting ready for these tournaments, and had a real good run. Played in 4 significant singles events and won 2 of them, and had a second to Mike in another one. And that kind of really reasonable health I have left is to get back out there and competing, because I realized how much I enjoyed it and how much I missed it, during those years where I really wasn't playing very much. It's one of the really maddening things about table shuffleboard is that in some ways we're an incredibly close-knit family. When someone is in trouble or has something bad in life hits them, the community rallies around them. I think for many of us, our best friends are fellow shuffleboard players. But it's also a very divisive community in a lot of ways, where we're still not all on the same page in terms of rules and things, and I don't think that we can get to the next level, without an association, without rules. And I really feel, I don't just feel this, I'm 100% convinced that the ASPA that Jason and Jay Norman started is the future of our game, and a lot of people have been reluctant to embrace it. They don't like this aspect or that aspect. But the bottom line is, nobody's ever going to come up with a format that everybody thinks is the greatest thing since sliced bread. And my personal opinion is the shuffleboard community needs to give these guys a shot. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but it's like a zero risk situation, other than the whatever it is, $10, $11 a week in league dues, and the upside is almost unlimited. And this is not just some harebrained scheme that these guys came up with. That both of them have years of very successful operations in league and pool and dart league tournaments in national associations, and these include leagues and then tournaments at the local, regional, and national level. And they've drawn all the best things that they could out of those two other sports and tried to put them together into a program for shuffleboard. And God, I can only hope that the community will just decide, regardless of whether they like or don't like various things, that they'll just say, you know what, we got nothing to lose. Let's give these guys a shot. And without that, I just don't see any way that the game moves on or grows. When I first got in the business, a residential sale of a shuffleboard table was a very rare thing, and now it's over 90% of my business. So on one hand, we have a whole generation of kids, from well-off, financially successful families that grew up with a shuffleboard table in their house, and they're all potential players for organized competition at some point in time. And that's one of the things I hope to do with Jason and Jay, is to, by using those contacts, get their league program out in front of people that would not have been exposed to it and probably have not played in any organized competition. But there are thousands and thousands of tables sold to private residences every year in this country, and we got a heck of a base that we could build this game from, but not without an organization and association. And like I said, this is the best shot I think that the game has ever had, and I really feel if we don't take advantage of this moment that we may not get another shot. There's so much competition now with other games and bars, and what people have to realize is that think of that bar as a piece of real estate, and it's going to be populated with table games, slot machines, whatever, and the owners are going to embrace the things that they can make money on. And without league programs, there is no money in shuffleboard. They may buy a lot of drinks, but one of the things that has happened in recent years is that Champion made inroads into Norway. I think it's probably close to 15 years ago now. And Norway is the hottest place on the planet for shuffleboard. There's at least 3 different companies now that are sending full container loads of shuffleboard tables over there on a regular basis. But Champion, I think it's as often as every 6 to 8 weeks, 30 or 40 more tables in a country. I don't know how long. Probably not the size of Texas. And what they've done over there is, they knew right out of the gate that this business model that we have in the United States, where you're paying $1 or $2 a game, there's no return whatsoever for the guy that owns the shuffleboard table. It takes, literally, if you buy a commercial table at $8,000 or $9,000 for a coin-op table, it's going to take you 3 years, maybe 4 years, just to get your money back. And you can buy a coin-operated pool table for $2,000 and have your money back in the first few months. So for a lot of bar owners and the companies that own coin-operated equipment, the last thing in the world they want in their place is a shuffleboard table, and that's sad because we all know it's a great game. And what happened in Norway is that there were no tables, so the guys who bought the first tables over there, realized that they had to make these had to be profitable. The model that we use in the United States, coin op for $1 or $2 a game, by the time you take care of the board and buy some wax, it really doesn't make any money. And so they came up with a completely new way to price it. Everything is done by the hour. And I know that on weekends, it's pricey over there, $30 or $40 or $50 an hour to rent a table for a group of people. But you literally have to make reservations, weeks in advance to even get on a shuffleboard, even with all the tables that they have over there. So it's obviously a way different business model than what we have in this country, but they have proven that if you can make the business model such that the guy who buys a shuffleboard table can make a reasonable profit on it, that's the only thing holding this country back from having a lot more shuffleboards. And, back in the 40s and 50s when shuffleboard was, when you're having these teams with hundreds and thousands of players, there wasn't the same kind of competition. You know, darts wasn't out there yet. Shuffleboard was much bigger than pool, much bigger. You know, 5 or 6 times as many shuffleboard tables as pool tables back then. But when the shuffleboard manufacturers got away from the frames format, which they had been using, which is a very predictable model, you know, 8 frames or 10 frames up and back, the game took 15 or 20 minutes. And on that basis, you know, could at least be somewhat reasonably profitable. But when they switched over to points, now all of a sudden that game that used to last 15 minutes, now it's 35, 40 minutes. So the coin-operated vending companies, which own most of the shuffleboard tables, that effectively cut their revenue stream, you know, by 60 to 70%. And so all of a sudden the shuffleboard tables were not considered profitable, and they couldn't get rid of them fast enough. And when the Hustler came out and the surge in popularity in pool, and then with darts and foosball and other things came in, now you got the electronic games and the golf simulators. Shuffleboard has a lot of competition now, and you know, think of, as I said, the inside of a bar is just a real estate development, and every square foot of that, the owner's looking to monetize. And if shuffleboard is the least profitable game out there, well, guess what? We're just not going to have very many shuffleboard tables, you know, in commercial settings. And so we're kind of at a crossroads, and that's why I feel so strongly that if we don't get a players association off the ground and a National League program, the game just doesn't have any chance. And it's frightening for me to think of, you know, how many fewer tables there are now in the bars than when I started out. There were leagues, and I mean, Omaha had, I think, 60 to 70 bars with shuffleboards, all involved in league play. It's down to less than 10. It might even be less than 5. And, you know, basically what has been my experience is if a league program, if an established league folds, the shuffleboards are out of that bar shortly thereafter. That is the whole key for the owner or the coin-operated vending company to make money from their tables. And if they're not making money, they're not going to devote the space needed for a shuffleboard. So again, it comes back to let's take a shot on the ASPA. If we're wrong, if it fails, we've lost nothing. But if it's successful, I think the sky is the limit, because we have a very appealing game. You know, people that play it for the first time get hooked, like all of us did. But you know, until we're in a situation where a guy can buy a shuffleboard table for his establishment and make some money off of that table, that's at least equal to the other gaming options he has, it's going to be a huge uphill struggle, and we'll continue to lose players and establishments. So we're at a real crossroads. You know, shuffleboard could go either way at this point in time, and we have so many positive things about the game itself, but so many negatives in terms of how it's organized. I hope we can get over this hump together. Well, those are great formats, and people love them. You know, anything where you get more play in, and that's, you know, essentially true round robin type of format with some modifications. But it doesn't sell shuffleboard tables. That's the thing. We've got to get over that hump. Like, the guys got to know, if I buy a shuffleboard table for my bar, I can get in the league, and a couple nights a week, I'm going to have a crowd in here playing. And format changes, new games, true round robins are great for us existing players, but they're not the kind of things that are going to make people jump out there and want to buy a shuffleboard for their establishment. And you know, we literally have probably a third the number of tables in bars and clubs that we did 30 years ago, and it's going to continue to shrink because the marketplace for that space, as I said, with other types of games, the competition's just increasing, and we have to show these people a clear path to profitability for those tables, or they're just not going to buy them. Well, it has to. I mean, we have more players dying than we have new players coming in. Leagues continue to shrink in many cities or disappear, and my God, the Pacific Northwest used to be the epicenter of shuffleboard activity. Now it's Texas, but back there in the late '80s when I was running all over the country playing, I mean, there was a shuffleboard in just about every bar you went into it, and the what was called the Northwest Regionals back then, which eventually became the PNW, they had, I think, 30 plus shuffleboard tables for an event that took place over 2 weekends at the fairgrounds up there in Longview, Washington. And those were all, every team, was a league-based team out of a local tavern. And I'd have to look through the press clippings that I have, but easily 100 bars from those two states represented in those tournaments, that had league teams, and that remains the foundation. You cannot grow tournaments without growing the leagues. I mean, this is not a what came first, the chicken or the egg. The leagues are absolutely the foundation. That's where new players come from. And changing formats, I don't care if you add $1 million to the pot, it's not going to get people playing shuffleboard if they're not already exposed to it in some other form, and that other form has got to be leagues. And there's a direct correlation between league play and tournament play, and we can't grow tournaments. Tournaments are under a lot of pressure right now. There's very few that are really thriving, and that's too bad, because the game is just far too great to have these struggles. And everybody gets up in arms, about pickleball and cornhole. And I have to realize that these people have some enormous competitive advantages. Anybody can afford to buy a couple of cornhole boards and set them up and have activity, but to have shuffleboard activity, you've got to have people willing to invest thousands of dollars in tables, and they're just, unless you can show them league activity where, hey, you invest this, but you're going to get this kind of return on it because we're going to bring a league program in, you're going to have players in here a couple times a week. The number of people that are competitive tournament players that didn't start out as a league player somewhere are very few and far between. And it would be, in baseball, if you eliminated the minor league system, well, I guarantee the game of baseball would be rocked hard, and within a few years they would be on hard times. And we've just got to realize that, put aside whatever differences we have and rally around the cause, because if we don't grow the base, our game is going to disappear. And it's not, yes, it's a long game, but curling has consistently been in the top 3 most watched sports in the last half dozen Winter Olympics. I believe in, not this past one, the one before, I think it was the highest TV ratings of any Winter Olympic sport. And that's a game that's longer than shuffleboard. It's played on frames, but they have eight rocks, I believe, a piece. It's a low-scoring game. You rarely get more than a couple points in a frame, and some of today's shuffleboard players are incredibly exciting to watch, and the shots that they make and the points they score. We have so many things about the game itself that are appealing, but we don't have the infrastructure to take it to the next level. Yeah, so back when I first started playing, and this was the most common format, it was in the American Shuffleboard League rulebook. It was 9 games, and those used to be 21-point games. A lot of leagues changed to 15, but still, you're talking about getting home at midnight, and in today's world, with very tough drinking and driving laws, people don't want to be out till midnight. And I believe the ASPA is just 5 games. I should have prepped myself a little bit better, but they specifically wanted to address that issue and have people home a couple hours earlier than that, and that's I think an important component of that. The other really important thing, and this is something that's really held the game back right now is our handicapping systems really are just smoke and mirrors. 3-point negative spot, a beginning player has no chance whatsoever. It sounds like they have a chance because they get this spot, but realistically they don't. And if you want to grow the game, give a path to people who are beginners where they can actually be competitive. And that doesn't mean they're going to win all the time, but in golf I shoot middle 90s, but because of the golf handicap system, once in a while I can beat a guy who shoots 72, with the 80% difference in our averages. And I know with the ASPA that you can get up to a rating of 7, and if a 7's playing a 0, they're getting 7 points. Well, the reason why shuffleboard leagues don't thrive is that the better players are always the ones running that, and they're never going to agree to a format with 7 points, because they could actually lose that, and they're looking at small picture instead of big picture. They're looking at they want to win the match. Big picture is you're spotting those guys 7 points. They're not going to beat you over the course of the year, but they're going to win some matches that they won't win otherwise. And if you look at the league standings, there's always a few teams on the bottom that we're out of contention within the first few weeks, and those teams eventually drop out, and you have to replace them, and that gets harder to do. But if you give them a legitimate chance to win, which I said that's kind of counterintuitive, it means that the best players aren't winning all the time, but leagues really shouldn't be for that if you're one of the top players. That's what tournaments are for. You want to grow the game, give the beginners a legitimate chance to compete against better players where they win once in a while, and I guarantee you will grow the game. Well, I sure hope it goes to 100% performance-based. That move has come slower than I would like, but I have enormous respect for Travis Ward, who has essentially taken over most of the rating system these days. And Travis, for those of you who don't know him, he was spent a career in the military. He's now an air traffic controller. He's a guy who's very precise about things, and maybe it's not moving as fast as I would like it to, but I do think that is coming sooner rather than later, where we're going to transition over to a performance-based rating system, either all or it plays a heavy role, in that. And data collection is hugely important, and whether that's Chris Treadway's program, which I personally love. We've been using it in Reno for years, and it interfaces directly with the Bowers rating system. It pulls in the ratings. We have all kinds of stats. And Scoreholio is also a great platform, although I don't think that it's a full-fledged tournament administrative program at this point in time. But those things will all help us, to achieve those performance-based statistics. And it's great that people are embracing both programs, because the old days of asking a tournament director to take a picture of the bracket and send in results, it just didn't happen. And using software-driven platforms is the future of the game, and we really all need to embrace that.